If you don't use it, you lose it. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about movement. And having good movement is key if you want to live a long, healthy life. Hi everyone, Floyd Meyer here with Catalyst Impacts, and today we're going to be talking about movement and how it plays into your longevity. Imagine with me for a moment, what do you think would happen if you didn't raise your arm over your head for 4 or 5 decades? As you can probably guess, you would lose the ability to actually just be able to put your arm overhead. And this may sound extreme, but actually it's extremely common. There are many millions of Americans and people throughout the world that have gone, they live in these societies, our Western societies, where it's not necessary for our bodies to move through full range of motion to make it through the day. So sometimes people go years, decades even, without doing basic human movements. Things like putting their arm over their head or being able to squat below parallel. It can become very easy so take the squat for example. Imagine you get out of bed and all you have to do is get up from parallel off the bed. You put your legs on the end of the bed and you stand up. And then you go to the bathroom, and again, you just have to get above parallel, or you're not going below parallel. Then you go and you get in your car and the same thing. So you could go, and then even if you go to the gym, unless you are specifically doing these types of lifts, forcing yourself to go through these basic movements, it can become very easy for them to just never happen. You'll just never end up doing them. You'll never go into a deep squat. You'll never put your arm completely overhead. And then over time, you can lose those abilities. And what happens is you end up getting injured because of it. So people end up getting injured not generally because of picking up, extremely heavy objects or what you would normally imagine. People usually end up getting hurt doing very simple things. Just grabbing something from the top shelf, and again, they haven't, put their arm overhead in, 5-6 years, and they go and they try and grab that bag of sugar that, weighs a pound maybe, and that ends up tearing their rotator cuff. Or they go and they try and pick something off of the ground, but they haven't actually done a good hip hinge or done a deep squat in so long that they end up throwing their back out because of it. And so this can lead to some serious problems later on. So what do you do about it? The key is that you need to have a movement practice. So a movement practice is a practice where you are going to bring your body through full range of motion. You are going to move your body through what's called these basic archetypes. And you're going to have to be strong in each of these archetypes. So it's not just a matter of doing a quick squat. It's being able to be strong in that position. It's not like you need to be lifting 300 pounds or anything crazy like that, but you need to be strong and stable in those positions. So the basic archetypes, and I got this from Dr. Kelly Starrett, who is a world-renowned physical therapist. The basic archetypes are: you need to be able to do a press, so press like that, a hang where your shoulder is hanging like that. Imagine if you were doing dips or ring dips or something like that. Putting your arm overhead, so doing a shoulder press or a military press. Doing a hinge, like a basic hip hinge, so you could imagine doing a deadlift. Obviously doing a squat with both your legs. A pistol, which is going to be just a squat on one leg, which is going to be more difficult. It's going to require you to have both full hip range of motion and full ankle range of motion. But you can imagine this is what, if you're getting up from a lunge, this is the kind of position that you're going to be able to do it. And then obviously doing a lunge is going to be the other position. So that really is all of the major archetypes. So if you think of sport, any kind of sport or weightlifting or any type of physical activity, it is going to be some combination of these basic archetypes in motion. And that's what makes up everything. So you really want to be able to be strong, be powerful, and competent in these basic archetypes. So how do you end up doing that? Unless you yourself are a physical therapist or you have a really awesome PT or a really awesome personal trainer, then you're probably not going to be bringing your body through full range of motion, doing all of these archetypes and becoming competent in them. So what's amazing is that we can look at different types of practices that have figured this out over the years. And I'm not saying that these practices are perfect, but what they do is they bring your body through this full range of motion. They make you competent in each of these different archetypes, so you are going to be better able to have a long, healthy life where your body is able to move competently. You know, it's really sad what happens when people are unable to move how they would like to. People lose the ability to walk, people lose the ability to just go on, do basic things because they aren't bringing themselves through these full range of motion on a regular basis. And if you do this, then you are able to continue to do that as you get older, which is really awesome. So a couple of different movement practices that you can choose from. One of them, my favorite, is yoga. So the yogis figured out a lot of different things, and one of them is how to move through these different archetypes in a nice flow, a nice pattern, so that you can move through them, but you yourself don't have to actually be thinking about it. If you have a good yoga teacher, they're going to bring you through all of these different basic shapes, and you are going to become competent in them and strong in them. Another option is Pilates. So they also figured out if you go through a basic Pilates class, again, you are probably going to be moving through most, if not all, of these different ranges of motion. And then another option, a newer option, is CrossFit. And CrossFit gets a lot of hate, and it does lead to a lot of injuries because people end up, pushing the weight, pushing the tempo way too far, even though they're not actually competent in these shapes. But the basic premise is actually very sound. It comes down to moving. Are you able to move your body through these basic archetypes? And then you're supposed to be adding the volume, adding the intensity and the weight so that you're testing these different shapes. So imagine if you're doing a squat. It's like, okay, you can do one squat, but can you do 20 squats? And then can you do 20 squats with weight? And you'll see where you'll break down. And what happens is that it's just become kind of a competition. So people end up pushing it much farther than their bodies are actually capable of enduring. And they end up doing, a ridiculous amount of burpees or thrusters, and they're not even doing good form. They're just doing it for time. But if done properly, CrossFit actually can be a great tool that can be used to get your body through these basic archetypes. Again, as long as you're not just trying to compete against the clock or compete against your friend and, it's not good to do a squat with 300 pounds on your back if you can't do a basic air squat properly. And a lot of times what happens is that these people, they go to these gyms and they just end up throwing the weight on because they want to be cool and they can lift it until they can't, and then they end up getting injured. But again, you want to find yourself a movement practice, and those are just 3 examples of different ones that if you follow them, whichever one you choose, you will end up moving through these basic archetypes and you're going to become strong and competent in them. So this is super, super important for those of us that are trying to live very long and healthy lives. You want to find this, and you don't need to do it every single day, but you should move through these basic archetypes as often as you can. So it doesn't have to be every single day. Maybe it's a couple times a week. Maybe it's only once a week sometimes if things get really busy, but you definitely want to find something that you yourself can do so that you don't have to think about each of these specific movements. Now, if you're going to be making up your own, you can do this on your own. If you're just going to the gym and going to be lifting weights and exercising, you can do a press, you can do an overhead push, you can hinge, squat, lunge. But unless you're actively thinking about it, you're probably only going to do, maybe 1 or 2 of these each day. And so you're really not moving yourself through that full range of motion that we need in order to perform and move at a high level for years and decades to come. So I definitely recommend trying out either yoga, that's the one that I personally have enjoyed the most, or look up some Pilates classes, or you can look into CrossFit, but again, just try and think of it as a movement practice, not necessarily just a place where you go and lift really, really heavy weights. Now, as you become more competent, you can obviously increase the intensity, increase the volume that you're doing, but you want to make sure that you're strong in these archetypes to start out with. So I hope this has been helpful. If you guys have any other movement practices that you think would be helpful, please leave them in the comments below. And again, most of this comes from reading and listening to Dr. Kelly Starrett, who is really awesome. So if you haven't checked him out yet, make sure you do that. So again, this is Floyd Meyer with Catalyst Impacts, signing off.